They were told they'd never fly, that the color of their skin made it impossible. But these men didn't just prove everyone wrong. They became the most feared and respected fighter pilots of World War II. 0. That's how many bombers they lost to enemy fighters. 0. In over 200 missions. This is the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, and it's about to blow your mind. What's up, Silent Warriors family? Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible, inspiring, and emotional stories in American military history. We're talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, the first African-American military pilots who fought in World War II. But this isn't just a war story. This is a story about courage against impossible odds, about men who fought two wars at the same time, one against the enemy overseas, and another against racism right here at home. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these heroes changed America forever. So buckle up, because this journey is going to be powerful. Let's get into it. Picture this. It's 1940. America is watching the world burn. Hitler is steamrolling across Europe. Japan is conquering Asia. And everyone knows America's going to be pulled into this war sooner or later. The military is preparing. They need pilots, thousands of them. Fighter pilots, bomber pilots, the best aviators the country can produce. But there's a problem. Actually, there's a massive injustice happening. African Americans want to serve. They want to defend their country. They want to fly. But the United States military has a policy, an official written policy. It says that black men are not capable of flying complex aircraft. Not smart enough, not brave enough, not skilled enough. Could you imagine that? Being told you can't serve your own country because of the color of your skin. Being told you're not good enough before you even get a chance to try. But here's where the story gets interesting. There were men who refused to accept this. Men who dreamed bigger than the boxes society tried to put them in. And there were a few people in power who started asking the hard question. What if we're wrong? What if we are wasting incredible talent because of prejudice? The pressure started building. Civil rights organizations were demanding equality. African American newspapers were calling out a hypocrisy. How can you call yourself the land of the free when you won't even let black men defend that freedom? And then something incredible happened. In January 1941, the War Department made an announcement. They were going to create an experimental program. They would train African American pilots. But here's the catch. They weren't doing it because they believed these men could succeed. They were doing it to prove they would fail, to justify their racist policies with evidence. They chose a location, Tuskegee, Alabama, deep in the segregated South, at a small institute called Tuskegee Institute, now known as Tuskegee University. They built an airfield, Tuskegee Army Airfield, and they prepared for what they thought would be a disaster. The military didn't hide their skepticism. Officers made it clear. They expected these men to wash out, to fail, to prove that the policy was right all along. The standards were set impossibly high, higher than for white cadets. The scrutiny would be intense. One mistake and the whole program could be shut down. But what the military didn't count on was the caliber of men who would answer this call. July 1941. 13 men arrived at Tuskegee Army Airfield. These weren't just any 13 men. These were exceptional individuals, college-educated. Many had private pilot licenses already. They came from all over the country, from different backgrounds, different experiences, but they shared something powerful, an unbreakable determination. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about them. This was about every African American who wanted to serve, every kid who dreamed of flying, every person who'd been told they weren't good enough. If they failed, the door would slam shut, maybe forever. Let me tell you about some of these pioneers. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr., the son of the Army's first African-American general. Benjamin had already faced discrimination at West Point, where white cadets refused to speak to him for years. 4 years of complete silence. But he graduated anyway, and now he was here, ready to lead. There was George Roberts, Charles Dubois, Mac Ross, Lemuel Custis. These names might not be famous in every American household, but they should be, because what these men were about to do would change history. The training was brutal, absolutely brutal. Flight training is hard for anyone. You are learning to control a machine traveling hundreds of miles per hour, thousands of feet in the air. One mistake and you're dead. The physical demands are intense. The mental pressure is crushing. And for these men, the standards were even higher. Their instructors were tough. Some were fair. Some wanted them to fail. Every error was magnified. Every success was minimized. The cadets had to be perfect, and then better than perfect. While white cadets at other bases got second chances. These men knew they might not get even one. But here's what made them special. They didn't just meet the standards. They exceeded them. They pushed each other. When one man struggled, the others lifted him up. When someone excelled, they studied his techniques. They became brothers, a unit, something stronger than any individual. And they had incredible support. There was Chief Alfred Anderson, known as Chief. He was one of their primary flight instructors, a black pilot who'd earned his license. Back in the 1930s, when it was almost impossible, he believed in them, pushed them, showed them it was possible. There was Eleanor Roosevelt. Yes, the First Lady of the United States. In March 1941, she visited Tuskegee, and against the advice of the Secret Service, against the protests of segregationists, she insisted on flying with Chief Anderson, a black pilot. She wanted to prove a point. These men were just as capable as anyone else. Month after month, the training continued: navigation, aerobatics, formation, flying, gunnery, emergency procedures. These men absorbed it all, lived it, breathed it. Flying became part of their DNA. And then, March 1942, it happened. The first class graduated. 5 men earned their silver wings. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr., Second Lieutenant George Roberts, Second Lieutenant Charles Dubois, Second Lieutenant Mac Ross, Second Lieutenant Lemuel Custis. 5 men, but they represented so much more. They were proof, living, breathing proof that talent has no color, that courage knows no race, that excellence can come from anywhere if you just give people a chance. But graduating was just the beginning. Now came the next challenge, getting into combat. Because even with their wings, even with their skills, the military still didn't want to use them. Some commanders argued they should be relegated to support roles, transport, reconnaissance, anything but actual combat. The Tuskegee Airmen kept training. More classes graduated. Dozens became hundreds. They formed the 99th Fighter Squadron. They trained on P-40 Warhawks, tough, reliable fighters. They practiced combat tactics, learned to work as a unit in the air, and they waited for their chance. Finally, in April 1943, the orders came. The 99th Fighter Squadron was deploying overseas to North Africa. They were going to war. Could you imagine that moment? After everything they'd been through, all the discrimination, all the doubt, all the impossible standards, they were finally getting their shot. They were going to prove what they could do where it mattered most, in combat. They arrived in North Africa and were assigned to escort and ground attack missions. This was it. Real combat. Real enemy fighters. Real anti-aircraft fire. Real consequences. And the eyes of the world were watching. The military was watching. America was watching. Hoping they'd fail or hoping they'd succeed, depending on who you asked. Their first combat missions were tough, not because they weren't skilled, but because they were still learning the reality of war. War isn't like training. The enemy shoots back. Your friends die. Mistakes are fatal. But they adapted. They learned. They became better. And then came a mission that would change everything. July 1943. The Allied invasion of Sicily was beginning. The 99th was assigned to provide air cover over the beachhead. Enemy fighters appeared. German Focke-Wulf 190 fighters. Fast, deadly, flown by experienced Luftwaffe pilots. The Tuskegee Airmen engaged. Captain Charles Hall was flying that day. He spotted an enemy fighter, got on its tail, lined up his shot, and fired. The enemy plane went down in flames. The 99th's first confirmed aerial victory. The first of many. But it was more than just a kill. It was validation. Proof that these men could fight, could win, could do everything any other pilot could do. The press covered it. Even some of the skeptical officers had to admit these pilots were the real deal. Back home in America, black communities celebrated. Finally, heroes they could point to. Proof that African Americans could excel in any field if given the opportunity. Kids started dreaming of becoming pilots. The impossible suddenly seemed possible. But the Tuskegee Airmen weren't done proving themselves. Not even close. The best was yet to come. As 1943 turned to 1944, the Tuskegee Airmen's reputation grew. More squadrons formed. The 332nd Fighter Group was created, composed entirely of African American pilots. They were assigned new planes. P-51 Mustangs, arguably the best fighter plane of World War II. Fast, maneuverable, heavily armed, perfect for long-range escort missions. And that's when they got a new job, a critical job, bomber escort. American B-17 and B-24 bombers were flying deep into Germany, hitting factories, refineries, military installations. These bombing raids were devastating to the German war effort, but they were also incredibly dangerous for the bomber crews. German fighters would swarm the bombers, shoot them down by the dozens. American fighter escorts would engage the enemy, but sometimes they'd chase German planes, leaving the bombers vulnerable. Bomber crews were terrified. The casualty rates were horrific. Enter the Tuskegee Airmen. They got a new mission. Escort bombers to their targets and back. Protect them at all costs. Don't leave them. Don't chase glory. Stay with the bombers. And here's where they did something extraordinary. They painted the tails of their P-51s bright red. Fire engine red. Unmistakable. So bomber crews would know. When you see those red tails, you're safe. We've got your back. They became known as the Red Tail Angels, and they earned that name with blood, sweat, and excellence. Mission after mission, they escorted bombers deep into enemy territory. Berlin, Munich, Vienna, the most heavily defended targets in the Third Reich, and they brought those bombers home. The statistics are incredible. In more than 200 escort missions, they never lost a single bomber to enemy fighters. Not one. That's unheard of. Other fighter groups had loss rates of up to 10%. The Tuskegee Airmen, 0. Bomber crews, specifically, requested the Red Tails. They trusted them with their lives, and the Red Tails never let them down. But it wasn't easy. The Red Tails faced some of the Luftwaffe's best pilots. The Germans threw everything at them. Messerschmitt 109s, Focke-Wulf 194s, even the new jet-powered Me-62s, the fastest fighters in the sky. The Red Tails fought them all and won. They racked up an incredible combat record. Over 15,000 sorties. Destroyed over 250 enemy aircraft. Damaged hundreds more. Destroyed countless ground targets, locomotives, trucks, buildings, supply depots. They dominated the skies over Europe, but it came at a cost. 66 Tuskegee Airmen were killed in action. Another 32 were shot down and captured as prisoners of war. These men paid the ultimate price. They gave their lives not just fighting for America, but fighting to prove that African Americans deserved equality and respect. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr., now commanding the 332nd Fighter Group, led with distinction. He flew 60 missions himself. His leadership was impeccable. His courage was unquestioned. He earned the respect of everyone, even the officers who doubted him. There were so many heroes. Captain Lee Archer, Major William Campbell, First Lieutenant Clarence Lucky Lester, who shot down 3 enemy planes in a single day, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart. These men were aces, warriors, legends, and the bomber crews loved them. White bomber crews who might have held racist views before the war came back saying the Red Tails were the best. They saved their lives. After you've been saved by someone, after they've put their life on the line for you, skin color stops mattering. Respect becomes the only thing that matters. But here's the heartbreaking irony. While the Tuskegee Airmen were heroes in the skies over Europe, they were still treated as second-class citizens at home, even on military bases, even in uniform, even wearing medals they'd earned in combat. When they were stationed in the American South, they faced Jim Crow laws, segregated facilities, whites-only signs. They couldn't eat in certain restaurants, couldn't stay in certain hotels. On some bases, German prisoners of war were treated better than African American officers. Let that sink in. American heroes, who'd risked their lives defending the country, were treated worse than enemy prisoners. How does that make sense? How is that justice? How is that honoring service? There's a famous story. The Freeman Field Mutiny. April 1945. The war in Europe was almost over. A group of Tuskegee Airmen was stationed at Freeman Field in Indiana. The base commander tried to segregate the officers' club, tried to keep black officers out. 162 African American officers refused to comply. They entered the club anyway. They were arrested, charged with insubordination. Think about that. Officers who'd fought for America, who'd proven themselves in combat, who'd done everything their country asked of them, arrested for wanting to be treated equally on an American military base. It was infuriating. It was wrong. But it was also a turning point. The charges were eventually dropped for most of them. The incident drew national attention. It highlighted the insanity of the military's segregation policies. It added to the growing pressure for change. Because how could America claim to be fighting for freedom abroad while denying it at home? The Tuskegee Airmen kept pushing, kept demanding respect, not just for themselves, but for all African Americans. They knew they were symbols, representatives of what was possible, and they refused to accept anything less than full equality. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. The Tuskegee Airmen had compiled an incredible record. They'd proven beyond any shadow of doubt that African Americans could excel in aviation, in combat, in leadership, in courage. The excuses were gone. The racist theories were demolished. The evidence was undeniable. And then came one of the most important moments in American history. July 1948. President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981. It ordered the desegregation of the United States Armed Forces. No more separate units based on race. No more discrimination in assignments. Equality, finally. This didn't happen in a vacuum. The Tuskegee Airmen, along with other African American service members, had proven that segregation wasn't just wrong. It was stupid. It wasted talent. It weakened the military. It contradicted everything America claimed to stand for. The Tuskegee Airmen were part of the evidence that forced America to change. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. continued rising through the ranks. In 1954, he became the first African American general in the United States Air Force. That's not a typo. The first African American general in the Air Force. The same man who'd been shunned at West Point, who'd been told he'd never amount to anything, who'd faced discrimination at every turn. He became a general. And he did it through excellence that couldn't be denied. But the impact of the Tuskegee Airmen went far beyond the military. They became symbols, heroes to the growing civil rights movement. They showed that integration worked, that African Americans and white Americans could work together, fight together, succeed together. When Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat in 1955, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led marches in the 1960s, the example of the Tuskegee Airmen was part of their moral authority. These men had fought for America when America wouldn't even fight for them. They'd proven their worth 1,000 times over. How could anyone justify continued segregation after what they'd done? The answer was, they couldn't. Not honestly. The Tuskegee Airmen had demolished the intellectual foundation of racism in the military, and their example helped demolish it in civilian life too. Individual Tuskegee Airmen went on to incredible careers. Charles McGee flew in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. 409 combat missions total. He became a colonel and a legend. Roscoe Brown became a university president. Lee Archer became a successful businessman. These men didn't just serve. They continued excelling in whatever they did. The nation eventually recognized what the Tuskegee Airmen had done. In 1995, they held a convention in Detroit. Hundreds of surviving Tuskegee Airmen gathered, and the United States Air Force officially apologized, acknowledged the discrimination they'd faced, honored their service. It was emotional, powerful, long overdue. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Tuskegee Airmen. The Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor America can give. About 300 surviving Tuskegee Airmen attended the ceremony in the Capitol Rotunda. These elderly men, in their 80s and 90s, finally received the recognition they deserved. Some wept, some saluted. All stood proud. President Bush's words were powerful. He said these men proved that a person's character is not determined by the color of their skin, that they had fought to was at once and won them both, that America was better because of their service and sacrifice. He was right. In 2012, the movie Red Tails brought their story to millions more people, while Hollywood took some creative liberties. The core message resonated. Young people who'd never heard of the Tuskegee Airmen learned their story, were inspired by it, wanted to know more. Today, there are scholarships in their name, museums dedicated to their legacy, schools named after them. Every year, new people discover their story and are moved by it, because it's a story that matters. It's a story that's still relevant. The lesson of the Tuskegee Airmen isn't just about the past. It's about now. It's about recognizing talent wherever it exists. It's about giving people opportunities based on ability, not appearance. It's about understanding that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. It's about having the courage to challenge unjust systems. These men faced impossible odds. They could have given up, could have said the system was too rigged against them, could have walked away. But they didn't. They fought. They persevered. They excelled. And in doing so, they changed America. You know what gets me about this story? It's the dignity. These men were treated horribly. They had every reason to be angry, to be bitter, to hate the country that denied them basic respect. And sure, they were angry. Of course they were. But they didn't let that anger define them. They channeled it into excellence, into proving the doubters wrong, into opening doors for the next generation. That takes a special kind of strength. The kind of strength that goes beyond physical courage. It's moral courage, character. character, refusal to let circumstances determine your worth. The Tuskegee Airmen knew their worth. They didn't need America's permission to be great. They just needed an opportunity. And when they finally got it, they seized it with both hands. And think about the bomber crews they saved. Thousands of young men who came home to their families, who lived full lives, who had kids and grandkids, because red tails were watching over them. Those families owe everything to these African American pilots. That's the real victory. Not just military success, but human connection, breaking down barriers one saved life at a time. There's a reason this story resonates so deeply with Americans. It's because it represents the best of what we can be. It shows that when we overcome our prejudices, when we give everyone a fair shot, when we judge people by their character and ability, incredible things happen. America becomes stronger, more just, more true to its founding ideals. The Tuskegee Airmen didn't just fight for military victories. They fought for a better America, an America that lives up to its promise of equality and justice for all. And while we're still working toward that promise, still fighting that fight in many ways, they showed us it's possible. They showed us the path forward. Today, the youngest surviving Tuskegee Airmen are in their late 90s and early hundreds. We won't have them with us much longer, but their story will live forever. It must live forever, because every generation needs to hear it, needs to understand what these men did, what they overcame, what they proved. If you're facing obstacles, if people are telling you that you can't achieve your dreams because of who you are or where you come from, remember the Tuskegee Airmen. They were told it was impossible, that black men couldn't fly, couldn't fight, couldn't lead. They proved every single limitation was a lie. They shattered every stereotype. They achieved the impossible. If you're in a position to give someone an opportunity, to open a door, to challenge an unfair system, remember the Tuskegee Airmen. Think about how much talent was almost wasted because of prejudice. Think about how much stronger America became when we finally gave these men a chance. Don't let bias blind you to potential. And if you're someone who benefits from the sacrifices these men made, if you can pursue any career you want, if you live in a more equal society, remember the Tuskegee Airmen. Honor their legacy by continuing the fight for justice, by standing up when you see discrimination, by using the opportunities they helped create to make the world even better. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen is an American story. It's painful in places because it shows our failures, but it's also triumphant because it shows our capacity to change, to grow, to become better. These men are heroes in every sense of the word, not just for what they did in combat, but for how they conducted themselves with honor and dignity throughout their lives. They didn't wait for permission to be great. They didn't let others define their limits. They wrote their own story, and in doing so, they changed the story of America. So silent warriors, that's the incredible story of the Tuskegee Airmen. Men who fought to wars and won them both. Men who proved that courage has no color and excellence knows no boundaries. Men who changed America forever. If this story inspired you, if it moved you, if it reminded you of what's possible when we believe in each other, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what part of this story resonated with you most. And subscribe to Silent Warriors for more incredible stories of courage, sacrifice, and heroism that changed the world. These stories matter. These heroes deserve to be remembered. And together, we'll make sure they never fade away. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, Silent Warriors.